Masechta Sanhedrin Daf Kuf Yud Beis Amud Aleph. We're starting from Ibay Lahu. The Gemara brings now a suffix Bedin in Adachas. Ibay Lahu. The Gemara is the Shaila, a city Shehutchu, that the people of the Avodah Zarah, that they were subverted themselves to serving Avodah Zarah, Me'alin, on their own, without having people inciting them. Mo, what's the din? The Gemara state Vayadichu. It says, and he had subverted Omar Achman. That's what it says in the pasuk. So it's Dafki Bey from Gazette that other people came and incited them to serve idols. But not that they were encouraged on their own. So maybe that's not going to have the din of Yonadach. I don't know. Perhaps even if they subverted themselves to serving Avodah Zarah, even they maybe will have din of Yonadach. So you want to touch my comment here, and I'll answer you. We learned in the Mishnah that that if women and children subverted the people of the city to serve Avodah Zarah, then we said that there is not a Yonadachas. Why, if Nashim Ktanim did it, it's not going to have a din of Yonadachas? Let her have a din, like as if they subverted themselves to serve Avodah Zarah. These people who subverted on their own, did it on their own will, so therefore we know they're going to stick to it. But here they were drawn after the women and the children, and are not committed to idol worship. So maybe the city is not going to have a din like Yonadachas because they're shaykh to retract. We learned to the Mishnah that the ear doesn't become a Yonadachas at sheyudach rubaha till most of the city were subverted in serving Avodah Zarah. How do we come to that conclusion that it was a murder of the city? Rabbi Yehuda said that you have to judge each inhabitant that's suspected. You have to warn them and bring Eidim, and then you put them in prison. And you do that till it becomes nisbara that most of the city had subverted themselves to Avodah Zarah, and then we'll have a din as a Yonadachas, and you kill them beside, and the money gets lost. You find that you're doing inadin, you're delaying the justice for those already sentenced for Misa, whether it's Messiah, or whether it's going to be Beskila. So why should you prolong the din? You're not allowed to do inadin. The moment you pass him on this individual, he's chayiv skila. Right away, the first ones that you deal with, you judge and you stone, and you judge and you stone. And the Shloka says that, and the Shloka says that once you come to increased number of more than the Reiv, then you has a din like then it'll have a din like Yonadachas from here and on, and only from here and on the din will be B'sayif. Once it's more than the Reiv. Itma, we learned. We learned the Gemara brings a machlekes in addition machlekes. Rabbi Yechon done with Zeichel. Rabbi Yechon says that you judge and you give skila till half, and then once it's more than half, everyone gets punished with sayif. Shlaka says that we add many more bati dinim, so to this you could be gaimed a din in the same day, and there won't be in a din. And then you'll see if Rev Yeshayir are subverted to Avodah Zarah, then everybody gets killed b'sayif, and the money gets destroyed. Says you want to any? Is it possible to say that you set up a whole bunch of Batidinim with Sanhedrin Ketana and you judge them, and you judge and you come to the conclusion if it's Reiv that everybody gets B'sayif? It says when it comes by the Sanhedrin Ketana, you dash from the pasuk, but it says only single Yechidim Could the Sanhedrin Ketana judge the Yidden, but not a Sanhedrin Gedela? Only a Sanhedrin Ketana could judge individuals, but not a whole city. But the thing is that you cannot be Meitzi, take out. You cannot have a psak to take out the entire city to be killed by Sanhedrin Ketana. And for the Gemara, that the words of Rish Lakish was like this: We get many batidinim to judge each individual. And the Yonim look on each individual till it reaches Reiv Anshe. And then once they see it's Reiv Anshe that had subverted Tavid Maskin Lahu, the best Nagadol, they bring it up to the best Nagadol in Yerushalayim, and there they complete the psak in the Sanhedrin Gedela that it's a year and a dachas, they get killed beside, and the money gets destroyed. So we learn you should hit the inhabitants of that city with the ched of the Chacham taught the caravans of the donkeys and the caravans of the camels that moved from place to place. And Lanu B'Seichan lived in the city, and they were subverted and with the people of the city. If they were there for 30 days, they are included with the Nadachas, they get killed with a sword, and the money gets destroyed. If it's less than 30 days, they consider as a Yechidim who served idols, they get skila with a million palat, and the money is spared. Zag the Gemara, or the effect Gemara Akash, come at you by a year. How long does one have to be in the city that it should be like the residents of the city? Zag the Gemara, 12 months, and you said 30 days. Here, this that we said 12 months is to become a citizen of the city, and here's just become one of the inhabitants of the city. And meaning as a raya, we learned that if somebody made a neder from deriving any benefit from the citizens of the city, if there's a person that's there 12 months, he cannot derive any benefit from him. But if the person is there less than 12 months, he can have enough from him. But here, and when you're talking about inhabitants of the city, and he made a neder against them not to have enough from them, if they were there for 30 days, they cannot have enough from him. That person who made the neder cannot have enough from him. But if it's less than 30 days, he could have enough from him. Zag the Gemara says in the pasuk Achrim, that destroy everything and everything that's in it. So the it says you should destroy utterly everything and all that is in it. Except to exclude tzaddikim, the property of tzaddikim that is located outside the city, you don't destroy. What is and everything that's in it? What is he coming to include? Says to include the nechasim of tzaddikim that are in the city. Shlalam, it says the spoils. So what about it? He says, but it cannot be the spoils of Shemaim, of Hegdish, or something that belongs to heaven. Anything that's that was Kodesh is excluded. It's called and when it says, and you should gather all of the spoils, serves to include the property of the Rishayim that is located outside the city, that is also destroyed. Why does the Torah say that the property of the tzaddikim that is in it shall be destroyed? Why must they suffer for the sins of others? They didn't sin. And who caused the righteous to live in these together with these Rishayim? Mamainam, the property that tied them to the city. Oh, so because of Mamainam, but therefore the money gets destroyed. Then you shall gather all its spoils. It's coming to include the property of the Rishayim that is located outside the city. Chizda said, and this is the halacha only with regard to the property that can be gathered into the city. Meaning, in that same day, in the time when they're destroying all the rest of the spoils of the city, if it can be taken from if the city is that close that you can take the Rishayim's possession, which is outside the city, that it's close enough that to make it to the city where the Ir and the Dachas is, while on time to burn all the shlalom, then you burn it. If not, it's mutter. The deposits of the inhabitants of the Iyanidachas are mutter, meaning they are not destroyed. In fact, what house are talking about? If it's talking about of another the belongings to people of another city, that property is deposited into the Yanedachas. Says you want to sheet in them? Of course, lav shlalu. It's not theirs. It's not the Yanedachas. Too. Rather, you can say it's the Yanedachas nechasim beisnu b'yacheres, and it is within another city. If we can gather it into the city at the time when they're burning all the other spoils, why should it be mutter? If it's that close, of course it's there, even though it's like a regular case of the people of the Dachas is the chasm in another city, that you're able to get in time to back to the city of the Dachas to burn it. So we already learned that that it's asa. And if it's so far that you can bring it to the Yanedachs on time, then the chasim that he gave it up as a pekad in another city, but it belongs to the people of the Yanedachs, but it's that far that you can bring it on time to burn it together with the rest of the city, then we learned already that we don't destroy it. So actually it's talking about that the property belongs to people of another city that is deposited in the Yanedachas. The over here it's talking about and over here we're dealing with that the Yanedachas people assume responsibilities for the Pekadin. So it's like that. I would have said I would have said since they accepted a chais, it's like this. And therefore it should be burnt. No, it's not considered as this. That's half of a Yanedachas and half of a person from another city. The halacha is that it's us, that's fully destroyed. But if it's a piece of dough that's part belong to Yanedachas, part to belong to somebody else, then the halacha is muteres, it's muter. My time behema. Why by behema we say it's not? Because behema command like pliyadamya. A behema of shutris, it's as if it's not divided, and therefore the whole thing is asmachila. Since the behema doesn't become muter till you cut both simanim, but one siman belongs to the Yanedachas, one siman belongs to the shchita, to the one that is not from the Yanedachas. So since the one siman is as if it's not there, because in order for shchita to be kosher, you have to cut both pipes. So therefore, it's aser. But Isa commanded pligadamya. But when it comes to dough, it's like it's divided. You don't need to have shchita in order to be matahit. So it's always considered as divided, and therefore it's going to be mutter. But Rav Chizda gefragt Shaila behemis Yanedachas mahu. What's the halacha of a behema that's Yanedachas and it's slaughtered, will the slaughter help it to become purified, that it won't be matama other meat? To be matara from being an avela, from being matama other meat. It says with the sword, with the edge of the sword, indicating that there is no difference whether doesn't make a difference if it was geschachten, the animal was geschachten, or it was killed. The animal, in another way, its status is that of a nevela, and it gives off tumah. What's the difference? How? Or perhaps we say duma, the kivnu shachta mahanyala shchita. I'll say since it was geschachten, so it was effective, and maybe it's not going to have any. It won't have the din of tumas nevela. And do you want to take who? What's the din? Take who? Wipe the kasha. But Rabbi Yezayah is the kasha. Say shall nashim. Tzidkani is mahu. What's the halacha? I'm going to get to here. Tzidkani is. Zag the Gemara, but the harder Rishayis asur. You're going to say, but the Rishayis is going to be asur. It's going to be forbidden, and it has to be destroyed. How could you say that? It says the tikba is v'sarafteksiv. That only what type should be burned, something that only needs gathering, that you should burn. Only somebody is lacking the gathering and putting it into the fire. Excluding this case, which is lacking the attaching, you have to cut it first, and then the gathering and burning. So therefore, even the here of a Rishas is not going to be forbidden. Rather, Rava says, rather, Rava is talking about with regard to a wig. So the Gemara is Heichidami. What is the circumstance? If it's attached to the goof, then it's like the goof itself. So the Gemara that no, it's talking about that the wig is hanging on a peg. I say it's like the property of the tzaddikim or tzidkaniyas, which are inside the city and therefore it is destroyed. So even by tzaddikim, possession of them in the city is destroyed. Or perhaps given the idol by nafkir or kiluv. Or should I say, since she enters and exits with the wig, so then it has a din like a garment. Kiluv take. So you want to wipe that shaila. Yes, and it says you should gather all the spoils into the midst of the square. I learned if it does not have a square, it does not become a ear of idolatrous city. Rabbi Akiva says if it has no square, then he creates a square in the city. What are they arguing? What are they arguing about? Rabbi Yishmael holds when it says a square indicates a square that existed already from the beginning, and Rabbi Akiva says no. When it says a chayva, it's square. It's even it refers to a square that was created now. We learned in the Mishnah, and the consecrated property has to be redeemed. That if there were kachim, offerings of the most most holy, if they were animals separate, made for the mizbeach, then made from the Mizbeach, then the halach is Yamusu, then it gets killed. But if they were for the fixing of the Beis HaMikdash, then the halach is you redeem it and you use the money. Utrumeis Yirakvu, and the Trumeis should rot, and Umaisa Sheni Vekisei Kedesh Yignazu. And when it comes to Maisa Sheni and Kisei Kodesh, there you have to bury it in the ground. When it says Behemta, it's telling you that not if it belongs to B'chayr U'Maisa, excludes a firstborn and animal Maisa, because that never belonged to the Yanedachas. Shlala, Prat L'Kesef Hekdesh M'Kesef Maisa. Shlala, it spoils. It's to exclude money and that was sanctified, Mammon Hekdesh, and money of Maisa. Amamar, if there were offerings for Kachik Kadashim, Kachim is or if there were animals that was designated for the Kedush of Nuzbayach, so the Hamusa, then the animal should die. Mama Yamusa, why should they die? Let them graze till they get a mum, and sell them, you put them the main one double and give them money for charity. The answer, because the offering is from which money? From the Kabbanis of Rishayim. So even if you redeem it, it's still an abomination, and it's unacceptable to use that money to buy a carbon. And Shlaksh says, no, Chatchila belongs to the Bailam. How does it belong to them? Because they took responsibility, if it gets lost, that they would replace it. And therefore it's abomination, it's theirs, it's here in Adachas, and therefore it has to be burnt. And we're following the Shita of Shimon, who says it's property of the owners. This Rabbi Shimon, from the fact that the Seifa, the second part of the Braisa, is the Shita of Rabbi Shimon. So one can make Reisha, one can imply that the Reisha, the first part, Rabbi Shimon, is not the Shita of Rabbi Shimon. The Gemara suggests a new explanation. Rather, the animals that shall die are offerings of lesser sanctity. First of all, I want to bring down, if you're going to say the Reisha is loving this, so you're going to say the Reisha is not Rabbi Shimon. So you have to say that Tiris of Reish Lakish. And the Reisha is different, that the Bryce is talking about Behema, that they separated for a carbon of Kachim Kalim, like a Shlomi. That follows the Shita of Aglili. And the Bryce holds, like Rabbi Yisrael Aglili, the Amam, Kachim Kalim, Mamman Bailam, claim that Kachim Kalim belongs to the Bailim, and therefore they included as part of the spoils of the year Nedachas, and they have to be killed. And it doesn't help to redeem it, because even the damim, the money is part included in the behema, and they're also no. So the Gemara is metaik up behema shul for the carbon shul kachik kadashim gain ayla behemas that was designated for a carbon ayla. What's going to be the din? The hechi, you have to say by ayla that they should have to graze until they get a mum. You padu, and then you redeem it for money and buy with the money a cup in the dover, because it's not mum and bailam. It's rather shlal hegdish, the spoils of hegdish. Why did the Braisa have to say in the Sefer shekatche but the gabayis that nechasim that were designated for the fixing of the Beis Hamikdash? That's why you redeem the money. You could have said a chilik in the kachim mizbeich itself, in the kabbanis itself, between kachim gadashim and kachim kalim, and say, Bamed, one of my murim. When do we say those kabbanis that were designated for Mizbeich has a din of Misa Dafke be Kachim Kalim? Dafke if it's Kachim Kalim because it belongs to the Bailam, and therefore it's part of the spoils of the Yanedachas. Ava Kachim, which is Mam and Hagdish, Yipadu, they should redeem. Having the Gemara, really the Braisa could have said so, but Mekim the Hikachata Shemeisu Baila Lamisa Asat Leipsikalei, since there is a chatas, which if the bailam die, the animal gets killed. So it wasn't clear to us. So in order to make a clear differentiation, because here also the owner of the carbon is going to die, mitzadi yanedachas. So if he's going to die, I would have thought maybe the carbon should also be destroyed. So it wasn't clear. So therefore, the Brais didn't make the chiluk between kachim gadashim and kachim kalim, rather between Kachim Mizbeich and Kachim Bedegabayas. Says Gemara Bishleim, it's understood why Rabbi Yechon Layam Karish Lakish, who says only Kachim Kalim belongs to the Bailim and therefore gets killed, the Kachim Kedashim, you redeem him, because the Chsiv is Zavar Hashem Te'eva. And since it says the Te'eva, even Kachim Kedashim should get killed, there's no takana of redeeming it. Alei Shlakish, who says Kachim, you do redeem. My time Alayim Rabbi Yochanan that you should kill the Kabbanis because of Zavar Hashem Te'eva. Why shouldn't he hold like Rabbi Yochanan? And the Gemara, when do we say that you pass the carbon because of Zavar Hashem Te'eva, that the carbon of Hashem is an abomination? Only when the carbon of the Rashi stands here in front of us. But over here, by the Kabbanis of Iran and Dachas, that we're not being makta behemis itself, rather we're redeeming it. And with the money that we redeem, we bought other Kabbanis. There isn't a concept of Zavar Hashem Te'eva. The Kimudi Ishtani. Since if the behemoths were exchanged, it's not the same behemoth as originally, so it's changed. And it's not called Zavar Hashem Te'eva. Rabbi Shimon says, it says, Behemta, we learn now from Behemta, not the behemoth of B'cheru Maisa. Maya Skinon, what kind of behemoth is B'cheru Maisa dealing, is Rabbi Shimon dealing with? If you're going to say it had no blemish, that it definitely belongs, it's the spoils of Hashem. You have to say that he's dealing with behemoths of B'cheru Maisa and Bali Mumin, that they are Bali Mumin. So if it's Bali Mumin, then it belongs to him. It's because Shainan came on the Chalon Bailam, we say it belongs. The Bailam get to eat it. So we have a kasha. Why Taka doesn't get destroyed together with all the other items in the Iran and Achas? Shlolan, it's part of the regular spoils. Ravinu said Bames, we're talking about by Bali Mumin Umi Shanachal Beteris Bahemta. Shimon is speaking with regard to Mum, and his statement should be understood as follows: that the mitzvah to destroy that which is eaten as its animals, as the property of the people of the Yanadachas. Yotzu Eilo Sheinu Echalim B'Teres Behemta. Excluded are these firstborn and Maisa Behema, which even when it's blemished are not eaten as its animals. Alabateres B'Cheru Maiser, rather they're eaten as a firstborn and Maisa animals. The Shlal Shamayim Ninu, because they are given, they're given as gifts to the Kahanim and are considered as the spoils of Hashem. And Shmuel and Halacha disputes and argues with the statement of Shmuel. Shmuel says, if everything is sacrificed and everything is redeemed. My karma, so you want to ask, what is he saying? You want to cover. This is what he's saying. Kol shekarush kashutam. That any carbon that is sacrificed on the Mizbeach when it is unblemished, and then it's redeemed when it is blemished, and then it has to be redeemed when it is blemished, it's excluded from the term of the spoils of the Iranadachas. Kigoyim b'chayr u'maisa mebehemta nafka. Like a b'chayr and maisa, that if a mum fell on them, if they got a mum, they go to the Bailam without redemption, then even when there's no mum, it's not excluded from shlala. Only you have to exclude it from behemta. From this that the pasuk writes behemta, that it means dafke behemta, not a behemoth of a b'chayr maisa. But otherwise, I would have not excluded it from shlala because it's his. Truma is yirakvu. It says the truma is sharat. Chizda says that this was only taught in regard to Tumah that is still in the hand of the Yid, who didn't give it yet to the Kohen. But once the Tumah, so if it's in the hand of a Yid and it belongs to a Yid in the Dachas, but it's not his, because it belongs to a Kohen, and it could be it's a Kohen of out of the city. So then it's not going to be Asa. But once if the Tumah is in the hands of a Kohen who lives in the Yanidachas, since it's his mamin, he gets burned. Mazar Rabbi Yosef is the Shai. Ma'aser Sheni V'Kisei HaKadosh Yiganzu. You said the Ma'aser Sheni and the Sefer Torahs have to be buried in the ground. Kisei HaKadosh has to be buried in the ground. In fact, what about Ma'aser Sheni B'Yad Yisrael? Kitum B'Yad Kohen Dami. When Ma'aser Sheni in the hand of Yisrael is like in the Kohen's hands, and he could partake and benefit from it in Yerushalayim. Ukatana Yignazu, and you said it should be buried in the ground. Says if you want to learn this, how you have to learn. Only if the tumah is in the hand of the kohen. That's when you have to burn it. But if the tumah is still in the hand of the yisol, which is not his property at all, because if the tumah belongs to a kohen, then it should be given to a kohen in another city that's not part of the Yeridachas, and it should not be left to rot. It's not Hassam. We learned in the Mishnah, Is Shemaisa Sheni P'turim Minachala. Is though a Maisa Sheni is pater from Chala. Okay, since it's property that belongs to Kadosh Baruch Hu. That's the words of Rameya, because we're talking about Isa Maisa Sheni. Chum say no, it's still Chayv Chala. Zog the Gemara, aber Avchiz Machlekes Maisa Sheni v'Yerushalayim. There's a Machlekes with regard to Maisa Sheni Yerushalayim. That was the Rameya Sava Maisa Sheni Mamin Gabayu. Rameya holds Maisa Sheni as a din of Mamin that belongs to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rabbanos have Mamin Hedjit too. Rabbanon hold it's Mamin of a simple person, not a Kohen. And so since the Chacham hold it's non-sacred property, from which one is chayiv to separate chala, both. So he says both. When a mammon had ablik vulin, they were akopata. He says ablik vulin but with regard to Maisa Sheni though, in the outlying areas, everyone agrees that he's going to be pater from separating chala, because as outside of Yerushalayim is usher to partake in it. Rav Yosef, Maisa Sheni, we keep saying Kedesh, Yiganzu. Rav Yosef is the kasha from the Mishnah. It says Maisa Sheni and Kedesh you should bury in the ground. What are we dealing with? By asking, what are we dealing with? Yerushalayim. If you say that it's a reference to Maisa Sheni Yerushalayim, can Yerushalayim be Ir Nidachas? Tanya, we learned in Abraisa. I saw the Vadim. There were 10 things stated when they gave to Yerushalayim. And it says over here, V'zuachs mehem, v'din zeh, and this din is one of the 10. Ein enas leir nedachas, that it doesn't become a ir nedachas. V'ela bi acheres, v'askula gava. Rather, apparently, the reference is to Maisa Sheni in a different city that wasn't ir nedachas. And before it was rendered, one took the second, the Maisa Sheni produce up to Yerushalayim. So that's what happened. If we're talking about, it was Bigvulin. I'm sorry, it was we're talking about it wasn't yet Iran Adachas. And they brought it up to Yerushalayim, and afterwards, that city that he brought it from became Iran Adachas, and the Ma'aser Sheni became part of the money of the city. Therefore, you have to bury it. But he says he still can't say it because the Al-Khaltum mechitzes, because wasn't the produce admitted into the walls of Yerushalayim, making it no longer associated with the Iran Idachas, and it should therefore be mutter to partake of it. Allah big Gvulan. Rather, the reference is talking about the Ma'aser Sheni was in the Gvulan. Ukatani Yignozu. And nevertheless, we learned that it should be buried. Zagim Haram Loi. So let me just finish here. We learned the Mishnah Samais Ba'achidu Mishum Shlal Inadas V'yesh Leichiyah Kan, not like Rav Chisda, because if it's Rav Chisda, everybody's made it a Ma'aser Sheni that's found in the Givulin belongs to Hekdesh. So why is it As Ba'achila? It's not Shlal of Iran Adachas, only it belongs to Hashem, Shlal Shemayim. For sure, it's Mom and Hedyatul, the Dibber Chacham. Only they were lenient to bury it and not to burn it, in order not to be Mizalz and Ma'aser Sheni. Says, you want to lie? You have no proof. You can establish the Mishnah, the Ir Acheres, Vaskula Gaba, that it's a Ir Acheres, and they brought it up to Yerushalayim. Nevertheless, we don't say Shekatlu, we don't say the Mechitzes gathered it in, and it's going to be Mutmachila. What are we talking about in the Mishnah? That the Ma'aser became Tamei, Ma'aser Sheni. Shenitma is forbidden to eat. Therefore, it has no takana by burying it in the ground. Why do you have to bury it in the ground? Well, if you let him redeem it in Yerushalayim, like Rabbi Lezer had said, that from where do we know Ma'aser Sheni that became impure, that you can redeem it even in Yerushalayim? Comes the pasuk and tells us that you are unable to carry it, and you shall turn it into money. Seisa means only eating. That's the real pshat of seisa. Where do we see that? Shanama, like it says in that pasuk, it says, and he took portions, masves, from before him, indicating that this Ma'aser Sheni produce that cannot be eaten, whether due to the distance from Yerushalayim or due to the Tumah, it could be redeemed. So you see, it could be redeemed. What are we dealing with here? It's not a case where the Ma'aser Sheni produce became Tamei. Rather, it's talking about when the Ma'aser Sheni, when produce was bought with money that belongs to Ma'aser Sheni, that became Tamei. And that's why this produce is buried, because he bought it with Ma'aser Sheni, and then the Ma'aser Sheni produce became Tamei. That's why it's buried.
But you should still be allowed to redeem it, because it's not in the Mishnah Ma'aser Sheni that says Halakuach because of Ma'aser Shenitma, an item that was bought with money of Ma'aser Sheni, which obviously you had the Ma'aser Sheni produce which was transferred into money, and then you bought something Shenitma that became Tamei. Says the Mishnah clearly you could redeem it. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda, the halacha, the Talmud, like Rabbi Yehuda, who the Amma, that he says that actually it's not strong enough an identity of like Ma'aser Sheni to allow it to be redeemed, as it says in that.